Radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening, Fade to Black. How you doing? Today's Tuesday, October 1st. Yeah, it's my birthday month. My birthday is in 10 days, 9 days. Well, if today's October 1st and my birthday's October 10th, do you take the one out and then is it 9 days? I don't know how that works. But my birthday's coming up in 10 days. Yeah, 61 years old. Let's do this. Starting another week here on Fade to Black. And last night, Toke Thompson was on with us. That was a very spirited conversation. Very cool. And talking about post-human folklore. Tonight, the one and only Kevin Randle is with us. Call the show the UFO Phenomena. That's it. With Kevin, I can go anywhere. We are going to do that tonight, but he is a researcher that this community has looked towards and depended on for decades now, and his research is second to none. He's great. Is he an author? Is he a researcher? Or is he a host? Right? Yeah. Kevin Randle on the show tonight. Tomorrow night, Richard Spence is with us. Secret Societies in America, another favorite subject of mine. And then Thursday night, Rick Leskowitz is with us. The Mystery of Life Energy. So this is what I've got this week. I've got PhDs and doctors every single night on the show. And that includes tonight, because Kevin Randle is here with us. I've got three major events. It's probably going to be five, but right now, three on the books over the next few months. Next month, I head to Peru and Bolivia with Brian Forrester. That's November 15th. Then the Conscious Life Expo here in Los Angeles, the event that I host every single year. It's the biggest, it's the best in the world. At the LAX Hilton. That is February 7th through the 10th, 2025. And then after that, I'm off to Sedona, Arizona for Rise of the Guardians. I'm going to present there. I'm going to do some hosting and goof around like I always do, but I'm also going to do a presentation. And that's March 29th and 30th, 2025 in Sedona, Arizona. All right. Now listen. Right now, I understand what's going on and the craziness of the Middle East and Helene just marching through the United States and everything else. And I know that it just seems like it's too much. It's just too much. And so you are joining me tonight to escape all of that. All right. But our thoughts and prayers are with everybody affected by these world events that are going on right now. Okay. But tonight, Kevin Randle is on with us, and I've promised a deep dive into the UFO phenomena. Tonight, we might dance into Socorro. We might do that. We'll probably talk about Roswell. We'll talk about Luis Elizondo, but there's a couple of other cases out there. And if you go over to Kevin Randle, I think it's Blogspot. We've got the links up in social media. Hold on, I'll tell you right now. Yeah, it's kevinrandle.blogspot. Head over there. I've just got it bookmarked. I'm constantly over enjoying what Kevin is currently interested in and researching and what he is doing. And so we might dance into his blog spot tonight as well. His interest in UFOs began in his teens and has led him to investigate hundreds of sightings, including nearly 30 years of research into the Roswell incident. And of course, his book with Don Schmidt, the UFO crash at Roswell, 1991, really turned things around for the UFO community. I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black, the one and only Kevin D. Randle. Kevin, young man, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. You're looking good too.
Yeah, you look great. You look great. You look great.
It's the light.
You know, that's what two old dudes do now, right? 20 years ago, we don't say that. Today, man, you look good. So do you, Jim. I love it, man. I love it.
But you're a youngster. You're a youngster compared to me. So.
Oh man, Don. We were talking about this earlier. Don was on the show the other day. Do you know how old Don is?
Not exactly. I think he's got to be pushing 70.
It's past that. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. And it's just like, or is he 71? He looks amazing, man.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He looks good. And I tease him all the time. But it's his fine line of hair care products that he's been pimping out there for years. They really work. They do the job. I use it. So, but anyway, welcome back to the show. And I do kind of want to start here because, and you and Don tell the story so famously well about you guys jumping in a car, one day and driving down to Roswell and getting that done. But if you guys hadn't jumped in that car that day, would your life have been different? And what I mean by that is, here we are in 2024, where this subject is now front and center, something that you've been pushing for and yelling for years. Now it seems to have arrived in Washington and the Department of Defense and the media. It's now, it's no longer a taboo subject. It seems to be a safe zone. Did you ever see this day coming, Kevin?
Well, not this way, but to go back, what happened is I write science fiction periodically too, and would attend science fiction conventions. And we were doing, I think it was XCon in Milwaukee, and it was going to be 3 science fiction writers against the 2 guys from UFOs coming up, Don Schmidt being one of them. And when he arrived alone, and I was one of the science fiction writers. It was going to be anti-UFO, but since it was a debate, I just switched sides. The interesting thing is, I think one of the other people, science fiction writers, was George R.R. Martin before he became George R.R. Martin. But we had a nice discussion about that, and that got me involved in the Roswell case because Don and the center were beginning an investigation into beginning of investigation into Roswell, actually. And they thought my military background would provide an insight that civilians wouldn't have about how the military operated and how all of these things work together. So they invited me to go along, and I said, sure, why not? We're going to go down there. We're going to spend a couple of days, and we're going to solve this thing, and we'll be home, and that's the end of it.
Right.
And as Don says, we were wrong.
Yeah, just a little bit. And on the heels of that, I do want to take a moment. I mentioned this yesterday and earlier today, but tomorrow on Netflix, the new version, I should say. Do we call it part 2? The
update,
yeah,
the reboot
of the TV series. And so anyway, tomorrow is an episode on Roswell.
Yeah, and I think when they were planning this thing out, they called me first because I'd been on the original Unsolved Mysteries on their original Roswell broadcast. And in today's environment, almost everybody who was on that broadcast with me had any knowledge. Stan Friedman, Walter Hott, Jesse Marcel Jr., they're all gone. So they were stuck with me. So they called me.
Right.
They called me to be on the program, and I said, sure, why not?
Yeah, they've done a really good job on this series. Okay. And I've watched all the episodes. I've watched them all. I'll be watching this one tomorrow for sure. But I like the way they go deep. This isn't like a fluffy. I think that the original Unsolved Mysteries, which we all loved, cool, but a little on the campy side. A little it was
They could get that way. And the Roswell segment, I think, was 15 or 20 minutes on the original series. We have the whole hour tomorrow.
right. Yeah. It's really a slickly done, well-researched show. And anybody that hasn't caught the new, I want to say revamp. Is that right? Reboot. Unsolved Mysteries reboot on Netflix is excellent. Go and check it out. It's really, really well done. And so that's going to air tomorrow. And I was, I keep mentioning when it comes to Roswell, it's the gift that keeps on giving. I don't think it's ever going to go away. But do you see a time when the government may start to reveal what they know about Roswell? Do you think that, or is it just too far gone now?
I think what's going to happen is, in intelligence work is what we would do. We would deny stuff, knowing that the opposition has the same information we do, and they could, spoil the secret at any time they wanted to. And I think of that as the way we are with the UFOs. They can change the dynamic tomorrow by landing in Washington, D.C. or London or Paris, France, or wherever, and revealing their presence. And at that point, it's no longer available to deny these things exist. That's the point where, we'll learn what all is going on. I see no motivation on the side of our government at this point to reveal what they know. Something is going to have to precipitate them revealing what they know. And I don't think we're to that point yet. I had thought when we started getting the video, the cockpit videos, and we were talking about the incident with the Nimitz and all of that stuff, and the Pentagon saying, yeah, these are real cockpit videos. We were moving toward this disclosure, but now we're 7 years down the road and nothing has changed. All they've done is we've created a new office to investigate UFOs. Well, that worked so well in the last 50 years. They keep talking about we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but when all is said and done, it's the same thing we've seen for the last 75 years after the Roswell case and all of that. It hasn't changed at all. There's no motivation for them to release that information. I look at what's going on now as sort of Twining 2.0, and Twining being General Twining, who kind of established the way the information was presented to the public back in 1947, 1948. And the idea was, well, there's nothing to it. We got to educate the public about that. And here we are doing the same thing. Well, we've investigated all these cases and we haven't found anything yet. We found no alien presence. Well, you're not looking in the right place. And originally, they weren't even going to look at the history of the UFO phenomenon. They were going to ignore that history. I think they were trying to separate what we've investigated in the past, including Roswell, and cases like Socorro you mentioned earlier, or Levelland, cases that have some real interesting meat on the bones. Separate all that from the UAP phenomenon now. And I think that's not working. They're now beginning to look at some of the older cases, but there's really no motivation by them to reveal what they know.
And you can laugh if you want, but I'm proud of this. Over the weekend, I watched for probably, I'm going to say, I want to say 50. I'm going to say 25 times. The 25th time that I watched the documentary from 1956, 1957, UFO, The Truth of About Flying Saucers. And that documentary is not only amazing, but when you really look at it, it's no different than what we are going through today. And that was made in 1956 and released in 1957. It's the same thing. And you know what's interesting about that documentary is there's no mention about Roswell, right? They talk about everything else, 1952, Kenneth Arnold, Montana, and all these different cases that had happened in the films that they had shown, but no mention about Roswell. but the issues of presenting this to the public and the thirst from the media and the public and the fight from the Pentagon and the Air Force to withhold this information, it's exactly the same as what we're going through today. You're right. The stuff hasn't changed at all.
Well, the problem with that documentary, the problem I have with that documentary is we have a lot of bad acting in it.
Oh, the acting was the best. That bad acting is the best part. You know what they call it? They call it a pseudo documentary. That's the description. Yeah.
But the important part of that documentary is there were two movies that had been taken, one in 1950, one in 1952, of UFOs or flying saucers, and there was information that kind of floated around in the public, but the government at that point was keeping them under wraps. So here's the first time we got to see those those films, and listen to the people who had actually shot them. Nick Mariana, who shot the one in Great Falls, Montana, and Newhouse. I want to say Roger Newhouse, but that was the guy from the Dallas Cowboy, Delbert Newhouse, who was a Navy Ward officer who had shot the color film. But they're just sort of blobs of light. There's nothing distinct about it. But you get to hear them and listen to what they said and what they went through. The interesting part is when Ed Ruppelt, who was the man in charge of Project Blue Book at the time the Newhouse movie was made, he said nobody bothered to ask for a description of what the UFOs looked like when they interviewed these guys. Well, I say these guys, it was Newhouse, his wife, and his children. Nobody asked him what it looked like because they were going to get pictures. So they just never thought to ask for a description of the craft. And Newhouse, I think on that documentary and later on said that when they first saw it, there were saucer-shaped craft. And by the time he got his movie camera out of the trunk of the car and began shooting, the objects that moved off into the distance were just bright lights sort of moseying around over the horizon there. But you get all that information and you can see these people talking about what they had seen and what they had done and how it all came about. And so it's a very important documentary in that respect. But it also gives you kind of an insight into how the government was dealing with these sorts of things. In the Project Blue Book files, I think there is a file about how we're going to respond to this documentary and what their talking points are going to be, how we're going to spin this. And so you put all that together and you get a kind of different picture of what was going on in the mid 1950s. But we're like I said, we're in the same point now that we were back in the 1950s or in the 1960s when we had the Condon Committee, the University of Colorado study that supposedly was an independent scientific study of UFOs, which was sponsored by the Air Force. And we found documentation, and I talk about this on my blog, as a matter of fact, I have the information there. There was a lieutenant colonel who was writing to the Condon Committee about what the Air Force wanted to be done. Lieutenant Colonel Hippler writing to the Air Force and telling them, well, we'd like you to find that there's the Air Force has done a good job investigating it. There's nothing of scientific value to suggest we should continue, and we should close Project Blue Book. And lo and behold, when the Condon Committee got done with their investigation, that was what they recommended, those three things. Yeah, the Air Force did a good job. There's nothing of scientific value to continue investigating it, and they should close Blue Book. But what we can look at today is they said there's nothing of scientific value to continue studying. And now we're saying, well, yeah, there was, and they were continuing that study. So it was all a put up job to keep us from learning exactly what was going on.
Yeah. And their conclusions were exactly what Hynek complained about and to the end of his life, was that there wasn't any science applied to any of this. And that was the problem. And here he is, right? An astronomer, a man of science, and he never got a chance to pull in other people and apply science to look at the phenomena itself. But yet the Condon Committee said there's nothing, the science doesn't support any of this. Well, they never did apply any science. It was made up, and it. I don't want to interrupt, Kevin, but that's where we are today too, as well, with like Avi Loeb and other researchers out there that are interested in the phenomena is that we need to apply the science to this and see what is actually going on, which goes back to that friggin' documentary from 1957, right? It's all the same situations.
Well, and when you talk about Hynek not being able to apply science, when he investigated the Socorro case, Lonnie Zamora seeing the landed craft and 2 alien creatures, one of the very few cases in Project Blue Book where they didn't label the witness as being psychological, having psychological problems for seeing alien creatures. They said it's unidentified. But there was another sighting in La Madera, New Mexico, which is up the road a piece from Socorro. At the same time, Hynek wanted to go investigate that, and the Air Force, who was sponsoring his trip to Socorro, said, no, you're there to do Socorro, then you come home. You could not go investigate this other case, which would have made the Socorro case that much stronger. So we see how they've manipulated the data, manipulated the people working for them, hiring people to run Project Blue Book who were rabidly anti-saucer, anti-UFO, believing that it's all terrestrial and it's nonsense, and they're annoyed at being assigned to this office. So, and that's what we see, like you say, that's what we see today. It's the same sort of thing. We hire Kirkpatrick to run Arrow, and he determines that there's nothing extraterrestrial involved here. I don't think you're looking in the right place. I don't think you're giving a proper evaluation to the evidence, especially evidence has been gathered carefully over 50 years. They say, well, it's all anecdotal. And my question to them is, when does anecdotal evidence become scientific observation? Because if you're talking about a witness seeing something and reporting what he or she saw, aren't we talking about what could be considered scientific observation as opposed to anecdotal testimony? It's just a way of dismissing the evidence. And that's what we see today. We're dismissing all the evidence that's coming forward.
Everybody that was around Hynek at that time, including like Jacques Vallée and later, of course, Don Schmidt and others and Paul, all have said the same thing. It was the Socorro case that Hynek was most impressed with. That was the one case. There were others, but it was Socorro that really grabbed his attention, and they did everything that they could to eliminate other factors, right? Including, what was it? The NASA lunar lander, right, being tested in the area, and college pranks being put on by kids, or whatever it was. They went and really did the research and came away with the conclusion that this was probably extraterrestrial.
Well, the one thing we really needed to get into is Hector Quintanilla, who was the head of Project Blue Book at the time of Socorro, went to the area with documentation, said he's got top secret clearances. He's got clearance to see everything that's going on down there. And he went in there with an idea that he's going to find a solution there based on something out of either Holloman Air Force Base or White Sands, New Mexico, that would account for what Zamora saw. And in his memoirs, his book, his unpublished book, he said that he could not find anything, and he was going to have to label as unidentified. And he thought, well, that's going to make all the UFO nuts really, really happy because he cannot solve the case. He thought there was something that Zamora, the police officer, knew that he hadn't communicated to them, not because he was trying to hide information, but because he just didn't realize the importance of it or didn't understand what he had seen. And if we could get inside of Zamora's head, then we'd find the solution. But of course, that never happened either. So you've got that sort of thing going on with Socorro, and it's a very important case because of the unidentified label applied to it, especially because of the idea that Zamora saw the 2 alien creatures, but you also had landing traces. The UFO touched down, and so the landing gear marks were left. When it lifted off, some kind of blue flame came out of the bottom and left the area right under it kind of burning, but it wasn't really a heat source type thing. The burning was sort of cool. It was still smoking when other people arrived. So there was physical evidence available there that wasn't gathered at the time. And that's kind of surprising as well. It was let's go talk to the people. The other thing that was interesting that got me going with the Socorro case was I was told by a couple of people, Ben Moss and Tony Angiola, that there were witnesses who had called the police station prior to Zamora seeing the object. And I said, well, you've looked at the police logs. And I never got an answer from them. So I got interested in it. And going through the Project Blue Book files, there's a letter from a Captain Richard Holder, who worked at White Sands, but his duty station was closer to Socorro than it was to the White Sands main base. So he lived in Socorro. He was involved in the investigation within minutes, 90 minutes, 120 minutes, something like that. And he sent a report to the Pentagon that night. It's a half-page report. It's in the Project Blue Book files, and he verifies that there were 3 witnesses who called the police prior to Zamora seeing the thing. Nobody ever tried to find them.
Yeah, was that the family at the gas station?
No, these were people who had called the police station. The family at the gas station, they never found. That was another group of witnesses they let get away. My point simply is we've got people who lived in Socorro, seeing the thing, hearing the thing go over. Socorro wasn't that large. They know the flight path. How hard would it have been to spend an hour or two knocking on doors to find those witnesses? The police didn't get the names of the witnesses because they didn't know the importance of the case until Zamora called him. So here was an opportunity to do investigation, but they didn't take it.
Right. And then the other thing there's 2 glaring things about this case that stand out that don't get the attention that they should. The first is, at the scene nearly immediately was everybody, right? You had the FBI there, you had the highway patrol, you had the local police, you had the Air Force, all on the scene at the same time in the middle of the desert in Socorro, New Mexico. Now, that right there needs to be discussed. How did everybody know? How did this happen? And why was it so important? Number 1. Number 2 is that symbol on the side of the craft, which was deliberately misinterpreted in the notes versus what was actually seen. And the significance of that symbol, I think, was known by our government at that time. And they didn't want that. What's the word that you can continue this if you want. They didn't. That was misinformation. That was disinformation. That was deliberate at that time, wasn't it?
Well, the thing about the symbol is that I think it was Holder who suggested to Zamora not to release what the symbol looked like, because what they were hoping was if there were other witnesses that saw the thing, then they could disqualify those who were making the story up because they couldn't reproduce the symbol properly. So it wasn't kind of an idea of hiding it for some nefarious purpose. It was actually a good investigative technique. Burns was the guy the FBI guy, I think he suggested not mention that you'd seen alien creatures because that would increase the ridicule factor. So they were trying to protect some more. So it's interesting, within the first few hours of the case, we've got Holder, who was an Army officer, involved. We've got the FBI involved. Just as the object disappeared, we've got Sergeant Chavez from the New Mexico State Police showing up because he was a pal of Zamora. So he's on the scene. It goes out over the radio. There's all kinds of people who are locked into the law enforcement agencies in Socorro who show up immediately. So they're tramping all over the place. But yeah. They did put rocks around the landing gear traces so that they wouldn't go away. And like weeks later, you could still see the impressions there. So they did some things right, but they did some things wrong. And then you have to put up with the skeptics who are not above making up information to discredit it. And one of the things they made up that's really annoyed me in the past is I think it was Philip Klass talked to a guy whose house may have been 100 yards away from the landing site. And he's saying, well, the guy should have heard it because he was outside in his garden and he should have seen something. And it turns out, well, the house is further away. He had been indoors. All the windows were closed, so he wouldn't have heard anything. And the guy said, well, I went up there after this happened and there was nobody there. And I'm thinking there's probably 15 or 20 people there by the time you got up the hill. So we can discredit it based on the testimonies like that. But there's always that going on. Klass suggested that this was a hoax, that the mayor of Socorro had come up with trying to create a UFO mecca, kind of like Roswell became, as a matter of fact, to draw people to Socorro, and he owned the land where the thing supposedly landed, and it turned out that wasn't true. And the idea of turning this into some kind of a tourist attraction didn't come about until like a year later, and somebody thought about that, and they could do some of those sorts of things. So you look at all of that information. This case is very, very good. I did a book called Encounter in the Desert, where I look at all of these sorts of things, including other witnesses. There were people who saw craft around Socorro area that night and the next night and that sort of thing, and look at all of that kind of information and try to understand exactly what happened. There is no good plausible explanation for what happened at Socorro, because all the explanations have been eliminated. I mean, the idea that the college students, or I think originally it was high school students, had created this hoax to make Zamora look bad because he was always handing out tickets. Well, isn't that kind of his job, to hand out tickets? He wasn't focusing on it. He was out there doing that, but he was a very, very conscientious police officer. So you've got that kind of thing going on. And here's a case that could have changed our perception of the whole UFO phenomena had the investigation been handled properly. And Hynek was stymied in his attempts to investigate it because of that. The problem with the symbol came about simply because they were trying to keep some of that information, withhold some of that information to eliminate copycats or liars. But Zamora sketched the symbol on a piece of scrap paper as the thing took off into the distance. And that piece of scrap paper, you can see it in the Project Blue Book file. So we know exactly what the symbol looks like in today's environment. But they published a different symbol later on, trying to divert attention from it, and as I say, as a way of determining whether somebody's seen the same thing or not.
Yeah. Socorro's an amazing case. It's absolutely an amazing case, and there's so much to discuss tonight. I wanted to ask you before we move on about, because of where we are today. Luis Elizondo's new book, Imminent, and what did you think of the book? And is it moving things forward? And did you get something from the book that you didn't know previously?
There was nothing in the way of UFO information that he presented that I didn't already know and have other sources that led me to it. What I learned from the book was a lot of his background, and that how this skiff thing works in the Pentagon, and you go down into the bottom, and it's a vault-like area that you can isolate yourself so you're not divulging classified information to those who are not here. Those sorts of procedures are something that I wasn't that familiar with. But with the UFO phenomenon, no, there was really nothing in there that was new. He mentioned, for example, I think he mentions Kecksburg once, but he doesn't tell us anything about it. He mentioned a case from Council Bluffs, Iowa, as a matter of fact, and doesn't really give us much in the way of the description of it. And it wasn't hard for me to discover information about it. I put a lot up on my blog of something seen falling out of the sky, and a number of people went over and they found a large puddle of molten metal that was collected at the time, which was kind of interesting about that. But he didn't provide much in the way of information, and it would have been very simple for him to gather additional information. That was more, well, he remembered this being discussed at some point and put it in there. He didn't follow up on it. But
wasn't Council Bluffs? I mean, my understanding of that case, I haven't gone back and looked at it in a long time, but my memory is it was a meteorite. That's kind of how I felt that it was. So there wasn't an object.
It sounds like it was a meteorite, but it was basically falling straight down, and they usually don't fall straight down. And the other thing was they found that puddle of metal, which was fairly widespread and fairly thick, and you would have rocks, or you might have pieces of the meteor around, but you wouldn't have molten metal on it after the meteor hits. So
well, wasn't it described, and listen, Kevin, you're more familiar with the case than I am, but my memory says it was like lava.
Yeah,
That's
yes.
what I remember.
Yeah, they were talking about being like running down lava. It was on a levee, and it was kind of.
Yeah, it was on a dam. That's right. I
Well,
remember that.
a levee as opposed to a dam, but it was.
Right. And
But it cooled rapidly. But you wouldn't have that kind of a phenomenon with the meteor.
yeah.
They don't hit the ground in a molten state.
Yeah, coming straight down is strange. I saw in the middle of the day. Now, I look back at this and I think about it now. It was pretty damn strange, but at the time, this is what I saw. This was probably 2012, like right in there, 2012, 2011, 2012. And in the middle of the day, and something catches my eye. There's no clouds. And this is in Burbank, California. And, Burbank is nestled up against the mountains right there. So I'm right there. The mountains are in front of me. But something catches my eye and I look up. Kevin, as I live and breathe, man, I see a meteor smoking. It's on fire, right? And I could hear it crackling. Not high. And it's going right across the sky with this trail of smoke. And I just stare at this thing until it went behind the mountains. And it was big and it was low and it was not fast. Yeah, it was weird, man. It was weird. It was not. This was my thought at the time. Now I would have handled it differently. I would have jumped in my car and gone out there. But my thought at the time was somebody's going to get rich. That thing's going to hit the ground and somebody's going to have, but nothing on the news about it. And I watched it. It lasted for a good 30 seconds. And my other thought was, how's it staying in the air? How's it staying up there? It wasn't going that fast, but it wasn't going straight down. It was going across the sky. It was going from south to north. Yeah, it was crazy.
The only thing I saw when I was carrying the newspaper in Cheyenne, Wyoming, when I was a paper boy, and I looked up and saw a aqua-colored object that broke into four pieces. It just fragmented and then disappeared, which I remember that, which was probably 65 years ago.
Now, so back to Elizondo's book. Do you think it's moving the needle? I do like the conversation that the media had when it was released a month ago. Everything has kind of simmered down a little bit, but did it move the needle for you?
No, it didn't move the needle for me because there was nothing in there that was new and exciting for me other than some of the inside workings of the Pentagon at a level I never reached. How they were working up there around the Secretary of Defense's office and all of that sort of thing. But the UFO information I found a little bit lacking. There was references to cases. There wasn't much information about them. He talked about the Del Rio case, I think, briefly in the book, mentioned that. I believe Del Rio is a hoax, and I would think anybody who's really deeply into that would know that. The Del Rio case was given to us by a guy named Robert Willingham, who claimed that in 1948, as a F-94 pilot, he was alerted by the dew line that something was flying over Texas, and he and his partners landed at Dyess Air Force Base, and he jumped into a private plane and he flew down and he saw the crash and the recovery just on the other side of the border in Mexico. And we all believed him because he said he was a retired colonel. And as I was working on a book called Crash When UFOs Fall from the Sky, which I did in 2010, I'm thinking, I wonder what's new on that case. So I looked some of this stuff up and discovered that Robert Willingham had spent 13 months in the military. He was not a retired colonel, as we all believed. He was a very low-ranking enlisted man. He served in the Army from December of 1945 to January of 1947, which made him a veteran, technically a veteran of World War II, because the war wasn't officially over until 1946. So if you served in that period after the shooting stopped, you still got to call yourself a veteran. He claimed he had been in Korea as a pilot, but he wasn't. There's pictures of him in an Air Force uniform, but if you look at it closely, it's really a Civil Air Patrol uniform. And if you understand what the Civil Air Patrol is, auxiliary of the Air Force, they do search and rescue. They train teenagers, a cadet program for getting people ready to go into the Air Force or things like that. They do a wonderful job, Civil Air Patrol, but it's not really the same thing as the Air Force. So his whole story collapsed. And then we find out that the F-94 didn't become operational until the 1950s. Same with the DEW line. So his story kind of fell apart, but we all believed him because he said he was a retired colonel. And in Elizondo book, he talks about this case, but he doesn't seem to know the nuances of it that's been out there for 15, 20 years.
Do you remember, I had a caller on the show. It was probably 10 years ago. So, I'm just taking calls. And this caller, I can't remember his name, but he was a DJ on the radio in Needles, California, when this UFO flew into town and crashed in 2008. He was on the air, and he told the story on Fade to Black. I was not familiar with this story. And he said that this craft came over, flew over town low, and then crashed like on a riverbank and just next to just west of town. And then immediately the Air Force and military, that they were chasing this craft, and they pulled into town at the same time that the UFO flew over. That was in 2008. Are you familiar with that case?
Yes, George Knapp investigated it, and I talked to George Knapp about it. And he talked about I always remember he interviewed a witness who lived on a riverboat there, and they called him Bob on the River because he didn't want his name revealed. But apparently that may have been some kind of a experimental craft from Area 51, because that's in the same area. And George Knapp was talking about how they were going into town and they saw a convoy of the black SUVs that you see in the movies. And they followed him until the SUVs pulled over and showed them their credentials. And George Knapp was able to talk to them about that. And they showed him some things like that. But I think the case was eventually revealed to be probably terrestrially made.
Yeah, it was just always a fascinating case to me. This guy said they were out in the street after somebody had come in and said a flying saucer just flew over. So they run out of the radio station. They're standing on the street. He said while they were standing there, the SUV started rushing by. And he said everybody in Needles is tiny, man. It's just a place that you drive through on your way to Vegas on the 15. Very small. But he said everybody in town was on the streets. And I'll watch it happen.
The one thing I know about Needles is my mother lived in Boulder City in Nevada, and there was a sign that said Searchlight Needles. And I always wanted to go see the Searchlight Needles. Searchlight was one of the town. Needles was in the town. I wanted to go see the Searchlight Needles.
Can we stay right here for a second? This general area, I live here in the Mojave. I live next to Lockheed Skunk Works. I live in Palmdale, right? And so this area, which goes back to the comment earlier about the neighbor should have seen the Socorro incident from his house. People are not, just because you live in the area, doesn't mean people are outside looking up at the skies, because I see stuff all the time here and nobody's paying attention. All right. It's just the way that it is now. But this area, from where I live to Edwards to Mojave up to Area 51 and then out to Laughlin and Kingman and then down into New Mexico, right? Roswell, Socorro, you have Holloman. This area has had its share of sightings. And then we have this fascinating case of Kingman. And it's not only Kingman, but it's the other sightings that happened in that area at around the same time. Again, remote area. What is it? What do you think is going on out here?
Well, I've always thought about it, if I'm an alien race and I discover the very warlike humans, and they're testing atomic weapons in New Mexico, and they're firing rockets into the sky from New Mexico, and there's other research like that going on, testing atomic bombs in Nevada, for example, I'm going to be very interested in that, because how is that going to affect my life or my home planet? Can these Terrans, as I like to call them, Earthlings that they usually refer to as, how can these people get from Earth to our planet and cause us a great deal of trouble? So I'd be interested in watching that. So I think that there would be an interest, a scientific interest by any alien species coming here to look at this specific area because of the type of research going on. You forgot Area 51, for example, right up there north of Las Vegas, for example. So, and Los Alamos in northern New Mexico, not to mention Holloman and White Sands and all the other things going on around there. Edwards Air Force Base, a lot of testing going on there of the latest aircraft and that sort of thing. So I think that you would be drawn to that sort of area specifically to see what sort of danger we might present to them. Currently, we present no danger to them because we can't really get off Earth that far, let alone into another star system. But I would be very interested in what our capabilities are. So I think that kind of explains why you have a lot of stuff going on in this area. And we can look at other places. Robert Hastings did a book about UFOs and nukes, looking at UFO sightings around military bases that have ballistic missiles and atomic weapons and that sort of thing. And the sightings that go on there and some of the activities going on around our missile silos. In 1967, I think it was 1967 in Belt, Montana, it's Malmstrom Air Force Base, one whole flight of ballistic missiles was shut down from the outside, which supposedly was impossible. It becomes a matter of national security because you don't want our competitors to realize that somehow you can shut down a whole flight of missiles so they wouldn't launch. But there was also a lot of sightings going on at the same time around Belt, Montana. So you're looking at ways of disabling our capability to launch the missiles. You're looking at that sort of thing. And what can I do to stop this sort of thing? And so you've got to take a look at all of that sort of thing. Malmstrom Air Force Base is Montana, I believe. Belt, Montana, yeah, Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. But you look at all of that sort of thing. So we have these military installations with these great, huge missile fields. I think the flight that was shut down, the missile flight that was shut down of N-10 missiles, was like 100 miles from the base. So they're spread out all over the countryside. In case we need
going back to that interest in where we are technically is what we would do if we found life on another planet that was behind us. Not advanced, right? Behind us? Well, yeah. If we found a planet that was like in the Middle Ages, right? In the Renaissance period, no electricity yet, we would have a tremendous amount of interest as to where they are in their evolution. And are they going to get to and then get to and get to? Of course. Why wouldn't ET be interested in where we are right now? Which takes me to Kingman.
Well, can I interrupt for just a moment to talk to your point? Because Carl Sagan had always said we could expect one alien visitation every 10,000 years. And my question is, when do you start counting the 10,000 years? And if you came to Earth and you found us in the Middle Ages, you found another sentient race that's developing civilization, I think anthropologically, which is a term probably wouldn't fit on another planet, given the definition of anthropology, but you would be very interested in that development and you'd want to watch that development. So you may visit a planet once every 10,000 years, but once you found the intelligence life, you're going to visit a lot more often and keep an eye on it. I think in 1973, for example, I've always thought of that sort of wave of sightings that started in, really blew up in the middle of September of 1973 and ended in the middle of November 1973. But you read the cases and you see that the craft are landing. The creatures are on, from the inside or outside. They're gathering stuff. They're stealing animals. They're digging up the flora and the fauna. They're taking all of the stuff back. I always thought of it. Here's a college professor with his graduate students. We're grabbing all this information. We're going to take it back to our university, and then we're going to study it. So they're doing that kind of research. So I think that argues to your point. Once they've discovered us, or once we discover them, we would be very interested in where they go. Now,
of course. Well, what are we, what are we doing right now as Earthlings? What are we doing right now? We're doing just that. The James Webb Space Telescope, and it's crazy that I can even say these words, is looking into the atmospheres of exoplanets. That's crazy. That's nuts. That's crazy.
If you remember the Drake equation, which was designed to determine how many intelligent civilizations could be in our galaxy, the one thing we did not know when he created that in 1960 was, is the solar system unique or rare, or are planets around other stars very, very common? And what we've discovered is they're very, very common. Lots of stars have lots of planets. Very few of them are in what they call the Goldilocks zones, where it's not too hot, it's not too cold. We can have liquid water on the planet and all of that sort of thing. But we found some of those, and you're absolutely right. We didn't know, we couldn't see planets around other stars, and now we're using instrumentation to discover what their atmospheres are. It's just crazy.
That's nuts. It's nuts. You and I, we're old enough. I just said it again. We're old enough to remember the space race, Apollo, 1968, 1969. I can Mercury, Gemini, Apollo. Everybody had their favorite astronaut, right? We went through that, man, and the TV shows and everything else. Well, you know what? We were, as kids, looking up, going, I wonder if we're alone. I wonder what else is out there. Well, we now understand and know that just about every star in the friggin' universe has at least one planet. In the universe. In the universe, man. Not the Milky Way. Everything. Well, that is what is nuts to me. It's crazy.
I think they now estimated there's a couple of trillion planets in just the Milky Way galaxy, given the size of our galaxy. So, and then you look at some of the pictures from today, and you see 5, 6, 10 galaxies in the picture. And it's just incredible. Like each of those galaxies is 100,000 light years across and probably holds 1 billion, 2 billion stars. And of course, I think the closest galaxy to us is Andromeda, which is but 2.5 million light years away. So it would take a long time to get to the Andromeda galaxy. But if you've defeated the problems of the speed of light, then you probably may be able to get that 2.5 million light years. So.
Yeah, Andromeda is so amazing to me. You can look at it with the naked eye. It's a smudge. It looks like a smudgy thumbprint, right, sitting up there. But just knowing that that's a bigger galaxy than ours, and how many trillions of planets are just right there. And you can cover it with a penny. You know what I mean? If you hold a penny up, just right there in that space of a penny is a couple of trillion planets.
But it is 2.5 million light years away. So we're looking at the galaxy that was 2.5 million years ago.
Yeah.
And at the speed of light, it would take us literally thousands of years to get there. We have to defeat the speed of light. Inside our galaxy, if we can defeat the speed of light, we can get to places.
Now, what do you think? Okay, so before we head to the break, staying on the James Webb Space Telescope, there's a lot of chatter going around right now. And it's been going on for about a year. I know a few people that are involved with the program. and that they have found a couple of exoplanets, one that they're specifically looking at that they have found a techno signature on. There's that. What that techno signature is, it hasn't been entirely clear. There are a few different groups because it's a multinational effort there. It's not just the United States. It's many countries around the world that are funding that project and are involved with it. That there's some infighting about what is actually going on and how to release the information. There's that. And then there's this other chatter that the James Webb Space Telescope is tracking a craft on its way here to our star system. What do you make of that? And is the government waiting for science to prove that ET is out there so they don't have to admit it, and then science will take the pressure off of the government for the big reveal?
I did a book called UFOs in the Deep State, and my theory in that, and I think it's a theory that's been expounded by other people, is that the bureaucrats are protecting their positions, their knowledge, their financial interests by not releasing the information about UFOs, which is why we don't know anything about it. The only way it's going to be broken, I believe, is if something like that happens, meaning that the craft, they spot a craft. In fact, I did a science fiction novel called Explorations, where that's exactly what happened. They discovered a craft coming toward Earth. It passed by our solar system and went off in a different direction, but there was some communication back and forth, proving that there was intelligent life out there. But I look at the motivations, and I just don't see those people who control the information having the foresight to release the information properly. They're guarding it for in their own self-interest, and I just see no reason for them to do anything different. If the science catches up and they say, yeah, the craft is coming toward us. Avi Loeb talked about something moving through our solar system.
Oumuamua. Yeah, Oumuamua.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, saying that this was an artificial object that came from outside the solar system and passed through it. But he also said it had been traveling for tens of thousands of years. So you're wondering, is it just a probe somebody sent out to say, yeah, we're here, as opposed to doing anything else? It's not moving at the speed of light. So it's been traveling for thousands of years. I think the Viking missions that we launched to look at the solar system, I think one of those craft is now outside our solar system. It's been traveling for literally decades again and just moved outside our solar system. And I think they'll make a contact with another solar system in 80,000 years. So the distances are just so vast. They're incredible. We have to find a way to defeat the speed of light if we're going to travel interstellar distances.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And the idea, Kevin, for it's always, well, it's got to be faster than light travel. It's got to be faster than light. I think it's much simpler than that. We are thinking in our boundaries of physics today, and what we understand. Whatever it is, it's something that we have not thought about. And it's very easy. Well, hear me out. Hear me out for a second. Hear me out. Husband and wife, ET, another planet in Andromeda, sitting, watching TV, right? And they go, let's go to Earth. We can be back in about 2 hours. All right, let's go. And they just do it because they can. And that, I think it's that simple. It's that easy. When you if you went back 200 years and you told people in 1800 that you can get up in the middle of the night, get in your car, drive to a 24-hour restaurant that's 20 miles away, and get a double cheeseburger, fries, and a shake and be back home before the food gets cold and you're eating in bed, you would sound like black magic voodoo.
Well, what I always say, we have to learn how to defeat the speed of light, which doesn't necessarily mean we have to travel faster than light.
That's what I'm saying. It's beyond. It's super easy.
It may well be, or it may well be if you're living in a small town and you want to fly somewhere, you always have to go to a hub to get there, which complicates the thing, the travel time. You know, you want to go from New York to LA, very simple to do. You want to go from some little podunk in Nebraska, you've got to go somewhere else first before you can make that trip. So it may not be as simple to make the short trips as it is to make the longer trips. We do not know. They always talk about how you put a dot at the top of a paper and a dot at the bottom of the paper, and they're separated by 11 inches, and you fold the paper, and now they touch. And so there may be a way to fold space to do that sort of thing. So you could be right that the UFOs, I've always thought of them coming from our local neighborhood in the galaxy, but you might be right. Maybe they are coming from the Andromeda galaxy because they figured out that way to fold space.
Yeah, they take a step. That's how much they travel. They take a step. I think it's like that. I really do. I think it's that simple. I have, Steve Murillo, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Steve and I, check this out. Steve and I are up in the Pacific Northwest, and we're sitting at a picnic table with about 30 people standing around us. And Kevin, you can call Steve and ask him about this. This is what happens in the middle of the day. It's 3:00 in the afternoon, and I've got a set of binoculars on a little tripod on this picnic table, and I'm looking at birds. Okay, I'm looking at frigging birds, enjoying the day. Steve is sitting right next to me, and we're just chatting. And he's one of my best friends. I love this guy to death. Super smart, just a great guy. And we're enjoying nature. And all of a sudden, in front of us, I'm looking in the binoculars, looking at the birds. This frigging craft comes out from behind this mountain, and it's giant. It's like 400 feet tall, and it's a cylinder, and it's spinning like this, and it's going. And I jump up, and I'm yelling video. The crazy thing is Steve is in the video. You can hear Steve describe what he's seeing. I go back in the binoculars. I'm looking at it again. I look at it with my naked eye. Come back to the binoculars. It's black with a chrome top and bottom. It was strange. Anyway, it frigging phased out in the middle of the sky. And it was huge. I didn't see it phase out. I was going back, like this to the binoculars, coming back, and Steve sitting next to me goes, "It phased out, man. It's gone." I was like, "What?" And it was gone. Just disappeared out of the sky. Now, explain that to me. So I think that goes back to the point that you're making about that dot to dot, the ability to, I don't know, travel between dimensions or parallel worlds, the multiverse. I don't know, but that's what we saw. This wasn't faster than light travel. It was just petering. I thought we were going to look at this thing for an hour. It was moving so slow, and it was so big. And then it just phased out, according to Steve. And I would have rather seen it phase out than the way I saw it appear. I'm the one that saw it appear. I would have rather have seen it phase out, but I didn't get that moment.
Well, there's a lot of stories like that where people are watching something and it just disappears. And we look at the sighting. I always say that if you haven't seen the object or haven't been watching it for a minute or so, you really don't get a good enough look to make good observations. You have to have a long enough time to see it. If somebody says, "Well, I saw it for 2 or 3 seconds," well, there's a lot of things that could happen that give you the impression of a spacecraft, but don't. But if you've watched it for a while or watched it through instruments,
I saw it. I saw it. I watched it. The whole thing, the whole incident was probably 15 seconds long. I looked at it. I got a moment in the binoculars where I just looked at it from top to bottom, and with the intention of remembering everything that I'm seeing. And it was black. It was huge. It was black with a chrome, like brushed aluminum top and bottom. It wasn't shiny. The sun was perfect. It was not fuzzy. It was perfectly in focus. And it had like a silver circle on the side of it. And you could see that circle as it was spinning. And then it would come back around and the sun would shine off of that one spot. I got it burnt into my retinas. I got a really good look at this. And again, I can only describe what I saw, which was it looked like a beer can, but it was 500 feet tall and probably 150 feet wide. It was huge. Empire State Building big. It was crazy.
But you say you can hear him talking about what they're seeing on the video. So you were making a video of this object?
Yeah, I jumped up when I saw it, Kevin, and I yelled, video, picture. And nobody knew. I was so excited at the time. Nobody knew what direction to film in, right? So anyway, everybody did do that. I got the video, and a friend of mine shot. She didn't shoot. She didn't know where to shoot at, but you could hear everybody talking about what they were seeing, including Steve Murillo. And I used some very colorful language too, as well. So while all of that was going on, I go back to the binoculars and I'm trying to see it again. And that's when Steve says it phased out. I couldn't believe it. I came back and looked, and it was gone. It was gone.
This is sort of like a sighting that took place in the Red Rocks in Colorado, the big amphitheater there, and they were setting up for a show, and they saw an object in the distance like that. It just happened recently. I don't remember all the exact details. I think there may be a bit of video shot as well, but they were watching this object in the distance. So it kind of reminds me of the very first UFO investigation I did. You had always heard about how they were fuzzy blobs of light in the distance. Nobody was getting a good look at them. And a friend of mine said that his mother had seen something when she was younger. And so I went to interview the mother. I'm a teenager, going to go talk to the mother. And the only thing I really wanted to know was it distinct? Was it very distinct? And she said it was hovering over the barn at about 200 feet. And I said, well, the edges sharp and clear. And she said, oh yeah, it was very, very crisp, very sharp. It wasn't a fuzzy blob of light in the distance. It was some kind of a circular craft hovering over their barn. So I mean, I understand that sort of thing, and you get that kind of a description, and there's what could it be? You know, you've had a long enough time to look at it. You've got proper observation, and you know it's like nothing you've ever seen before. But it would be very nice if somebody would get some good crisp video. And that's the other thing, you know, why everybody's carrying cell phones in today's environment. Why don't we have good video of UFO?
Well, and here we have this sighting going on. I might be able to hold on for a second. Let me see if I can pull up this file. Just stay right there. Here we have a Class A, absolutely holy grail moment. This giant craft is out there, and I'm yelling, and you know that's the question. We have okay, so here it is. Check this out. Ignore my colorful language, but you can hear Steve Murillo and everybody else. So remember, this is okay. Here, I'm just going to roll it. Here we go.
Oh, tell me somebody took a picture. I swear to God, I will shoot everybody here.
It's disappeared now.
Oh, no, there it is. I got it.
Okay, so that's Steve Murillo that says it disappeared. Okay, now I'm going to back up this footage. the object, nobody can see my arrow here. Okay. But see the mountain top right there? See the mountain? It came out right below that, and it was out, and nobody can see my mouse. I apologize for that. You can't see my mouse, right, Kevin? Okay.
No.
So, but it's out about a half an inch. It's out. You can see there's no clouds in the sky, and it's just next to the mountain out. Depends on how big your screen is, but say a half inch out, just in the middle of the sky, right there. It's right there. Okay, so let me continue with the video.
There it is. There it is. I got it. I got it.
Give us a position,
Where?
man.
No, that's a bird. No, the UFO wasn't a bird.
No, that was shimmering. That was glinting.
It was a ball. It was huge. Okay, who shot it?
Okay, so that was Steve Murillo that said it was shimmering. Yeah, that was so Steve's voice, and so yeah, and by the time that video got shot, when she pans over to the mountain, you can hear Steve say it just phased out, it just disappeared. So yeah, I did my best, man. I did my best.
I've been kind of looking into this because my brother-in-law asked me one day, why are there no good cell phone videos? And so I was looking at that, and oftentimes the object isn't in sight long enough for them to get their phone out of their pocket and switch to video mode and record it. But also there's any number of cases in which there's some kind of interference with the video. You don't see the object. There was a wonderful case from Canada a number of years ago where a bunch of hunters saw a big, huge dumbbell-shaped UFO, and they tried to video it. And what they ended up with, you can hear their voices talking about it, but the screen is blank. You don't see anything on the screen, so they were unable to video it. Other times the video just doesn't work. The camera doesn't work. So that answers part of the question. I was talking to a skeptic the other day, and I said, short of having a craft in the bodies, what sort of evidence would you like to see? And he said, I'd like independent witnesses videoing the same object from different points of view. And if you had something like that, and we should eventually come up with that, you can gather an awful lot of data. You can get altitude, you can get speed, you can get size from the various vantage points of the independent witnesses. Frank Ridge is doing something called MADAR, which is using technology to alert people to a close approach of a UFO, using the electromagnetic effects and checking the barometric pressures and other atmospheric phenomena. And it will trip if there's something going on. And they've been putting up what they call their node centers all around around the world. And they're getting some interesting matches going on where people, the node center alerts, and there's a sighting in the area. So now we're getting additional evidence. It's not just people seeing something. We've got instrumentality involved with it. And they're trying to set it up so there's cameras that come on so we can get that kind of data. I was asking Avi Loeb about this, and he said he would like to see a sighting without people involved. He wants it just recorded in some fashion. I'm not sure how exactly you do that because there's going to be people involved in it in some way. But the MADAR system that Frank Ridge is running would do that for us. We would have interaction with the environment. We would have the photographs. We would have the eyewitness testimony, and they set up a calling tree around there. So if they see something, they've got people call, they can go outside and it's in this location, take a look at it. And so we're gathering that kind of data now. I think it's only it's only a matter of time before we get a really good sighting like that. That's kind of what I'm looking for.
Yeah, last week, and then we'll break to a commercial. I said last week, last month. By the way, I just spent a week with Seth Shostak. Okay, a full week. Okay, and I got to tell you, he has taken his lumps from the UFO community. I get that, but he repeatedly said to me, over those 7 days. He wants to be the guy to make contact. He wants to be the person to tell the world. He wants to be the person to change history. He's not hiding anything. That's his goal, is that. Now, he doesn't have any proof of anything. He hasn't had a sighting. He hasn't. No. But that's what he wants to. He wants to be the person to do that. And I think SETI, SETI is doing the right things, in my opinion. And so, taking this a step further, like with Avi, Seth wants the science, Avi wants the science, and I get that. So, but last month, I'm on my upstairs patio, and I went out to look at the meteor shower that was happening maybe 6 weeks ago. And so I go out there. I've got binoculars, and I've got night vision, and I've got my telescopes and everything upstairs on the patio. And I've got a really good rig set up. So I go out there and I'm watching. The meteor showers are in full action, but I'm facing Skunk Works. It's a mile away. All right, I'm facing Skunk Works. The runway points to my house, and while I'm watching the meteor shower, Kevin, I see this light, and it had been up there, but I was looking at the meteors. I really wasn't paying attention to what's going on. But this light, it's a white light, and it's flashing. It stops and then backtracks on itself. I went, oh, okay. Now you got my attention, right? Okay. All right. So I sit out there and I watch this thing in like this box area, just zigzag over Skunk Works, just back, forth, up, down, sideways, zigzag. And twice, maybe 3 times, it came up almost directly over my house. And I got a really good, it wasn't high, couple thousand feet, but I got a really good look at the underside. It was three strobing white lights in a triangle, right? And I got it was big. It was good size. It was good size. Dozens of feet, 50 feet, across, pretty big, but silent. And then I watched it go back, and it's strobing. These lights are like not flash. They were strobing, like, right? Okay. So anyway, so it goes back and it's doing its thing, and I watch it for like 30 minutes, and I get bored. I go in the house. Yeah. So I didn't shoot video. I didn't think it's something being tested, right? So I go on the air the next night, Kevin. And so a good video, right? Where's the good video? Well, I should have shot that, number 1, but I didn't think it was alien, number 2. But number 3, to your point, I go on the air the next night and I tell the story, right? And I said, I saw this thing last night. And I don't know what it was, but, I think something was being tested. I don't want to give it away. Maybe there's something secret been going on, but that's what I saw. The night after that, it hits the internet. UFOs over Palmdale, 6 objects in the sky. No, that's not what happened. And the video and my name is mentioned in the comments, right? And I'm like, I don't want to mislead anybody. I had to go back on the air, Kevin, and go, no, that's not what I saw. I saw 1 object, 3 lights out there for a half an hour doing its thing. I got bored and went in the house. I never said it was aliens. It's like the game of telephone, right?
Oh,
Yeah. And the videos that went out on the internet, no, man, I'm not vouching for that. That's not what I saw. It's not what I saw. And I'm not pointing fingers or blaming or saying somebody created a hoax or whatever, but it wasn't 6 objects over Skunk Works. It was 1. Same description that I gave, zigzagging and, because it did do that. But I didn't see it, didn't fly off into the sky. There were no, laser beams. I didn't see any little green men. I saw what I saw, but nobody posted a video of what I saw, and I didn't shoot it either. And I had 30 minutes to do it. I could have done it. I just didn't think it was worth it.
Well, I think that we've got to get the idea. We have the cameras, and it's not like you have film, and film is expensive, and you have to develop the film, and it's not all that great. We've got wonderful cameras in our cell phones. We can record for hours. Have you seen anything yourself? I always talk about the really crappy sighting I had back when I lived in Denver. A friend of mine and I were members of the Denver UFO Society, which I think is still operating, as a matter of fact. So it's a long time ago. And we're having a meeting down in Castle Rock. And we're sitting around the campfire. And there was an object we watched going overhead from north to south, just a light, nothing spectacular. Moving steadily, gets right overhead, it flashes, and someone says, "Oh, they're communicating with us," and it disappears to the south. So my friend and I, what we did was we looked to see if there were any satellites in a polar orbit at the time when we saw this thing, and there wasn't anything there. So all I've really seen is a light crossing the sky. In today's environment, you'd say, well, that's a satellite. And that's exactly what it looked like. But at that time, it was the mid-1960s. And
polar orbit back then was rare.
Yeah, and there was nothing that we could find, nothing to suggest anything was in a polar orbit at that time that we would have been able to see. And in today's world, we can look on the internet. The SpaceX program and their Starlink satellites are causing us a great deal of problems with people seeing the trail of lights in the sky and not knowing what they are and reporting them as UFOs. An awful lot of Starlink satellites. But at that time, we just didn't have anything like that. The heavens weren't as cluttered as they are now.
Let's take our break. Kevin, you stay right there. Our guest tonight, Kevin Randle. Tonight, we're talking about the UFO phenomenon. This is Faded Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Backley Tappy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, the one and only Kevin Randle is with us, talking UFOs all night long. And he is one of my favorites. And I'm going to just say this right now, Kevin, moving forward. You've done so much for the UFO community over the last 30, 40 years. And on behalf of the community, just thank you for everything that you have done. You've really, really done your work, and it doesn't go unnoticed, man. So on behalf of the community, I just want to thank you right now.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. But it's also been a great deal of fun. There's nothing more fun than becoming involved in an investigation and finding the trail that leads you somewhere. Which evidence.
Which takes me to this next point. I was reading in your blog a case with Stan Gordon that took place in Pennsylvania, and the dates are there and full description of the case. And so I'm reading it, and I stopped. And my question is, have you ever done what happened to me? Has this happened to you? So I stopped and I went, wait a minute. This reminds me of two other cases from 30 or 40, 50 years ago. And so I do too much research. I read way too many books and things. So, but the description of what is in the Stan Gordon report that you jumped into, down to the first sighting, the first car he tries to move forward. It's a little bit further back. His car stops working. A second car pulls up. The second witness, his car stops working. Discussion about calling a tow truck. The description of the craft, a tube-shaped craft, all the way down. And I thought, wait a minute here. I've read this before, but I've done this constantly. I read too many books, right, where things are overlapping and cases are there. Has that happened to you, where you read about a case and you go, wait a minute, this reminds me of another case? And so is it a question of people remembering another case and it becomes contaminated in something that they are seeing, and then the information gets repeated? Or are the cases just frigging similar and the same events happen and they're unrelated to each other? And has this happened to you?
Well, I run into things where I'm reading something, that's really familiar, and can never find the other reference. But I think that you and I are a little bit different than most people, where we're immersed in the UFO phenomenon. So we read a lot of this stuff. But I think you pick two random people off the street, they're probably not immersed into the UFOs. So when they start talking about some of their experiences, like the car stalling, they may not be familiar with that from other cases. That would be something that happened to them. That case was interesting because for a couple of reasons. One of them is the Condon Committee, when they were investigating UFOs, didn't want to look at level land where they had a large number of cars stalled. They said, well, it's too long ago. We can't do the research. And we can think of no way that if you remove the electromagnetic field, the car would start spontaneously. And so I was looking through Mark Roddiker's monograph on car stalling, and you read it carefully, and it doesn't say the car started spontaneously. It was usually the driver takes some action. In level land, there was one guy who says, yeah, my car started spontaneously, but everybody else was talking about how they had to take some action. And this is what happened with the Stan Gordon case. They got in the car, they tried to start it, it wouldn't start, so they called for the tow truck. And then when the investigator arrived, got into the car and tried to start it, they could start it. So the field had been removed, the car could be started again. So the Condon Committee's excuse for not looking at these cases is ridiculous. But it's like a case that took place close to level land. Amarillo. I always want to call it Armadillo, Amarillo, Texas, in the hours just before everything happened in Levelland, which was 150 miles south of Amarillo. But the witness's car stalled and they couldn't get it started again. Turned out that there was something wrong with the battery and was towed. They had to have it towed in. But it's a case of similar thing, close approach of a UFO affects the car in some fashion that is more long-lived than a lot of the other car stalling cases. So yeah, I run into that periodically too. And then I spend an hour going through stuff, trying to find the other references and think, well, I should have made a note at some point. I came across a letter in the Project Blue Book files, and when I was doing research into the Levelland case, and it was talking about how they had the one writer was complaining because they had all these flying saucers, all these UFO cases, and they couldn't study them all. They didn't have the manpower. And the letter was from the Air Force headquarters that we just started a new project. So you should be able to tap into that. And I think it was like the beginning of Moondust would allow them to do that. So it's the beginning of Moondust. I have never been able to find that letter again. I know it's in the administrative files somewhere. I'm thinking, okay, you were looking at this time period. I cannot find that letter again. I wrote down the pertinent information on it, except exactly where it was. But I wrote down who it was from, who it was to, what the date of it was, what the numbers of it was, but I cannot find that letter again. So yeah, that happens to me all the time as well.
I find it so interesting. And when I do a lot of historical comparisons, and I like going back to Kehoe. Ruppelt's autobiography, by the way, is pretty compelling. But when you and Dolan's UFOs and the National Security State, and others, where you go back and Hynek's books, his two books that he wrote in the 70s, are amazing with the historical references that are there. And then you go and once you do this over and over again, you do see a very consistent play that is going on here. And the consistency of that, and this is the rabbit hole that I constantly go down, is today we have sensor data and satellites and so, but back then when it was radar and eyewitness testimony that was going on, it's a very, very consistent story that we see repeated. The government gets involved. The Air Force does their research. They're looking at their military personnel, which were all professionals, and the radar operators and the pilots, and of course the ground crews. And then you have law enforcement that is in play here. And it's a very, very consistent story, of which there are thousands of cases like that. It's not just one or two. It's thousands of cases that repeat the same thing over and over again. Today, yes, I get it. But if you go back before 1970 and look at the way that this was handled, it was a different situation. And I'm very, very interested in that part of our history when it comes to UFOs.
Well, there's another point that needs to be made. Project Blue Book gathered 12,000 UFO sightings, and they said we were able to resolve all but 701. I made a rough survey of the Project Blue Book files, and there's 4,000 to 5,000 that are labeled as insufficient data for scientific analysis. Well, that's no explanation. So what they've done is they created a category that removes the sightings they can't explain from the unidentified into something that's pretty innocuous. Well, we didn't have enough data. There was a case from Austin, Texas, right at the end of Project Blue Book, and the Air Force assigned the insufficient data label to it. And the witness wrote back and he said, well, why? We got a good look at it. We filled out the detailed report that the Air Force demanded. The lieutenant who came out to interview me asked lots of questions. We got all this information. What data was missing that wouldn't allow you to make a scientific analysis? And the important point there was, well, then they changed the case to unidentified. But the real thing going on there is what we learn is there's literally thousands of cases in Project Blue Book files that are insufficient data for scientific analysis, which doesn't explain anything. The Condon Committee actually explained the sighting as a natural phenomenon so rare it had never been seen before or since. I'm thinking, I'm Joe Scientist here, we now have evidence of a natural phenomena possibly that nobody has really investigated. Maybe we ought to take a look into that and see if there is something there that is important for us to learn. But the scientific investigation that Condon was doing was, well, we didn't find anything of interest. And I'm thinking, yeah, maybe not, but you didn't really try all that hard. So we've got this thing going on, as you say, back in the 1950s and 60s when the Air Force was investigating, gathering data officially, and yet they're unable to explain basically half the sightings that are reported to them.
The other part to this, and I'm talking about a historical perspective, is that this is my take, and I'm not here to offend or piss anybody off, but we have a way, which I appreciate. We have a wave of new enthusiasts that are involved in the UFO phenomenon because of what went down in 2017. I get that. But the UFO phenomena didn't start, or UFO phenomena didn't start in 2017. It didn't start with the Nimitz. It didn't start with the Roosevelt. It didn't start with Luis Elizondo. It didn't start with To the Stars Academy. There is so much to research before that, which is what I and you have always been involved with. And that's the situation here. People need to understand you can't learn everything overnight. You just can't do it. You can't jump into Twitter and suddenly become a UFO researcher. There is so much historically to do. And I think Luis Elizondo found that out very quickly, that you can't just know everything overnight just because you're in a position to comment on this. You don't have the historical reference. It would take you a lifetime to learn all of that stuff, which takes us to the Foo Fighters. And so today, right now, on Twitter, there's analysis of a new video that has surfaced from World War II, and the analysis going into what is being seen in this video. You commented on this on the blog. My question to you is, and I want your comments on your research, is your reference to the film clip the same clip that is circulating right now on Twitter?
I believe it is.
Okay, good.
And the thing that I looked at, and I may be one of the few people who can comment on that, having experience with tracer rounds coming at me from various locations while I was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam. It's interesting, and you have a blob of light crossing the sky, for example, in front of I think it's a German bomber. But I'm wondering if it can't be a tracer round. And the thing is, they burn very, very bright, so they get a look at them much larger than they really are. And if it's crossing in front of you as opposed to coming straight at you, then you'll be able to see the tracer round burning. So I'm wondering if it's not a tracer round. A lot of the movies you see with the aircraft firing tracer rounds, they seem to fly in a bizarre pattern. They jerk around, and that's actually the motion of the camera as opposed to the round. The rounds will fly straight if you're not on a platform that's vibrating. So I'm wondering about that. Tim Printy, I think, commented on my blog, and I said the same thing. I wondered if it's not a tracer round fired from another aircraft in the formation, and he said that kind of the same thing. He wondered if it wasn't a tracer round. Doesn't mean it is. It's just a light crossing the sky in front of these aircraft, and we know that firing is going on because the aircraft that took the gun camera films is trying to shoot down the bomber. And you you can see that going on, but this is coming from the side and crosses in front of the aircraft. So it's interesting. It could be a tracer round. It could be something else, but from where we sit right now, it's a Foo Fighter. We don't know exactly what it is. We can speculate, but we don't have enough information to really pin it down.
It looks to me like, and I like your comment in the blog, by the way, you're very honest. You go, I've watched this film to death. Right? and I have too. It looks to me, I want to go E.T., I want to go Foo Fighter, I want to go something strange, but it looks like the bomber is flying through tracer rounds, because that second round definitely comes back towards, right? The bomber's flying past it. That's kind of what it looks like to me. But does a tracer round stop?
They burn out. There was a
what? No, that's not what I'm suggesting. It looks like it goes in front of the bomber's going this way. It's going away from you, and the tracer round comes out past it, and then so does a tracer round slow down? Isn't a tracer round the same as any other round? It's just got phosphorus in it or something.
Well, but as the phosphorus burns out, the round, the dynamics of the round, the aerodynamics of the round changes.
Oh, so, okay.
So you can see a tracer round hit something on the ground and bounce up, and you can see it bouncing, where you wouldn't see that from a regular round, because their core is solid, but the tracer round burns out, so it changes the dynamic of the round.
I didn't know that. Okay.
We made what we called mini mortars in Vietnam, where we take the nose out of a tracer round, punch a hole in the bottom, put it back in the round, and touch off the gunpowder, and it goes spinning off in the distance. We called them mini mortars. It was just something we did because we were bored.
Oh, doesn't that sound like a good time? No, but then we have the opposite of that, and we have to remember, in a historical context, nobody knew who was responsible for the Foo Fighters. Right? Germans thought it was us. We thought it was Germans. Japanese thought this, that. We saw it in both theaters, right?
All theaters.
Yeah, all theaters. And that in most of the descriptions that we have of the Foo Fighters is that they were flying along with the craft. A tracer round wouldn't do that, would it?
Well, a tracer round would speed beyond the craft. I think in today's environment, we have jet aircraft that outfly the tracer rounds. In fact, if you read about the aerial combat going on using jets, after they fired a bunch of rounds at a plane, they have to break off because they don't want to fly under their own bullets, which could happen. But a lot of the descriptions were blobs of light following along. Sometimes they would shoot at them. Sometimes the rounds would go through the blob of light. Sometimes they wouldn't. And then there's also cases where they see an actual object as opposed just as a blob of light. Keith Chester and a guy named Graham Randle has done wonderful work on gathering the documentation and the testimonies of the Foo Fighters. So that gives you a better perspective of what was going on. But you're absolutely right. Everybody thought it was somebody else's secret weapon and didn't know what they were. And of course, now that the war is long over, the Foo Fighters disappeared. So you wonder, is that something that was going on? Alien race watching our combat for some reason? Or is it some kind of a natural phenomenon that's related to all the aerial activity and all the shooting going on and something like that? There's all kinds of things it could be. So, but the interesting thing is, once the war was over and the imperative to learn exactly what it was gone, they just didn't care anymore. And it was never really resolved exactly what the Foo Fighters were.
Yeah, it's such an interesting point. I hadn't thought about it that way. The war ended, and so did the conversation about Foo Fighters. Didn't hear about it in Korea, right? I didn't, or any other conflict.
Well, there are UFO sightings from Korea and Vietnam and other conflicts, but nothing.
Oh, for sure. But Foo Fighters themselves, in that context, operating that way? No,
Yeah,
nothing after World War II.
There's really nothing else that follows that. Right after the Foo Fighters went away, we had the ghost rockets in Sweden or Scandinavia, which looked, some of the descriptions look an awful lot like the V1s, I think. But they thought it was something that the Russians were doing to intimidate the Scandinavians. And when the Soviet Union collapsed and all those records could be accessed, it turned out it wasn't Soviet, so nobody knows what the ghost rockets were. So we go from Foo Fighters to ghost rockets to flying saucers.
Now, in the little time that we have left, you've been at this for a very, very long time. So I have to ask you the honest and obvious question: Is something about to go off? Do you feel something tangible, different from the past that? I hate to use the word disclosure. It's so overused. But do you think the moment is now? Do you think something's about to happen?
When the cockpit videos from the Navy were released, I thought we were moving in that direction. But that was 7 years ago. And we really haven't moved very far. All we've done is set up a whole bunch of investigations, and we sit into those conferences, and we do it. We can do it now through the internet. And I sat through those conferences, and I'm sure you probably have too, listening to the people talk about how they're going to do it and what they're going to do and what investigations they want to do and what assistance they want, where they want to go. And yet we never get anything else. That's all we get. We need the investigations. We need to know what the sightings look like. And we have to find people who are dispassionate about the work. We don't need somebody that says, well, there is no alien visitation, therefore we're not going to find that. We're going to find solutions. And we don't want somebody who says it's all alien visitations. We want to find somebody who's dispassionate, looks at the evidence and says, this one we can't explain. We're not sure what it does. This one suggests something else. With the Roswell case, I often say, we've examined every terrestrial explanation possible, and we've eliminated them all. Does that take us to the extraterrestrial? Does that prove that Roswell was an alien spacecraft? No, but where else do we go? I would like something more tangible to find out exactly what happened, but the explanations, the mundane terrestrial explanations have all been eliminated. And that was the one good thing that the Air Force had done in their investigation in the mid-1990s. They confirmed everything that Don and I had found about possible explanations for the Roswell case, except the ridiculous Project Mogul explanation, which their own report eliminates because it says the culprit in that, the flight number 4, the culprit didn't fly. It was canceled. So all the explanations are gone. Where do we go now? Is there some secret project still that we don't know about? And I don't know what it would be after all these years. It'd be so secret that we couldn't reveal it yet. But where do we go now? And we don't have that answer. A lot of people said that's sufficient to say it's extraterrestrial. I want a little bit more, but I have to lean in that direction.
Now, are you surprised that the world didn't implode in 2017? You know, we got the headlines, right? It's all over the news and the New York Times, and the footage and everything. But the Vatican didn't go away. Religions didn't collapse. Wall Street didn't collapse. Nobody jumped out of buildings. We didn't have anarchy in the streets, which was supposed to be the reaction of the world. The reaction was pretty boring. Were you surprised about that?
No. I've often said that if the government announced tomorrow that we've been visited, there might be momentary shock. But I think most people are going to say, they're talking about events that happened 75 years ago. It has not adversely affected my life at any point. Why should I panic now? And so I think we've become more sophisticated. We're used to the idea of space travel. In the late 1940s, you had Buck Rogers, you had Buster Crabbe playing somebody.
Forbidden Planet.
Great film, Forbidden Planet. But we had all these movies where we're dealing with the alien beings and that sort of thing. We had Star Trek in the 1960s, and we've got everything going on beyond that. I think we're too sophisticated to fall into that trap at this point. I've talked to religious people. I've actually asked them that question. I mean, I'm talking about priests and ministers and that sort of thing. What do you think? And the attitude has always been, it really doesn't change anything, does it? It just expands the universe to a point where it's much more immense, much important than it was, but it really doesn't change anything that much. I think that if you looked toward economic collapse, you would say, well, they may have a way to eliminate fossil fuels and produce all kinds of free energy. So then you have an economic impact on it. But we've also seen that happen in the past too, where one energy source is replaced by another one or a better one. We've gone from horses being the way that we move around to trains to cars to airplanes. So there's always an advancement in the technologies, and we're usually prepared for it. So I don't see it being, I don't see it adversely affecting our day-to-day life. Except, of course, if you happen to see the episode of To Serve Man on the Twilight Zone,
Right,
where the aliens come down and give us all the things we need. They eliminate disease. They eliminate the need for standing armies. We've got all this stuff. There's there's travel to their planet. And one of the aliens leads a book at the United Nations, and they finally decode it. And the title of the book is To Serve Man. And the one guy is getting on the spacecraft to go off to the other planet. And his assistant runs up screaming at him, don't go, the book, it's a cookbook.
It's your dinner, dinner. And well, it kind of reminds me of, and I always go back to this, Kevin, Childhood's End. And, you know, when you take that story and the 3-part miniseries is just so good. But you take that story and you think about it, right? E.T. shows up, eliminates jobs, disease, everything is perfect in the world. You have zero stress, right? And now 2 things were in play. They wanted our kids, Childhood's End, right? They wanted our kids, which they take. And second move, they just blow up the planet. It was, you know, they needed to clear things out. And so that's it. I think it's so close to the mark of a possibility, right? Where you just go to in the end of that movie, man doesn't defeat the aliens with a biplane like in Independence Day. No, the end is the end. You know, and I always go back to that and just think about the reality of the situation is not what we want to naturally gravitate to. It could be something else completely different.
I think our thought processes is always, if you are technologically advanced to a certain point, you become more benevolent as opposed to more warlike. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's proved out pretty well on the Earth, where an advanced technology meets an inferior technology, and it certainly doesn't change the inferior technology at all. Think of, you know, the Europeans coming to the New World, for example. That worked out really well for the indigenous peoples here. But you'd have to take a look at that, and as if you become that sophisticated and that technologically advanced, would you be more benevolent, more beneficent than what we expect? And there are stories that go in that direction as well. And there's stories of the unintended consequences. Well, we wanted to help you do this. We didn't think that this would happen, and this bad thing happened because of this change we made. In psychology, if you've got some kind of a phobia, like a fear of heights, it's very easy to rid somebody of that fear by just sort of immersing them. You know, we go up to the first floor of a balcony and look off, and you get used to that, and you go higher and higher, and pretty soon they no longer have the fear of heights. And yet then that phobia sometimes manifests itself somewhere else. It's an unintended consequence of removing the one phobia and you replace it with another one. So you can take a look at that sort of thing. We've eliminated this problem for the human race. We didn't see this consequences. It was going to lead to the end of the human race type thing.
Yeah, that is so interesting, because if you think about it, we were just a star system of one until 25 years ago. We didn't know what was beyond our star system, if there were other planets. Now we know that every star has a planet, and everybody understands that now. We've now been taught, and now we understand the ginormity of the universe, and that how many planets are actually out there. Planets are more common than stars.
Well,
That's a crazy. So there is a lot of life. So yeah, why would anybody be shocked about an ET presence here on Earth?
Well, the other thing we didn't know, the nearest star is Proxima Centauri, which is like 4.1 light years away, but it's part of the triple star system. It's, well, they can't have planets in a triple star system. Well, it turns out you can. We discovered the planets in this triple star system. So a lot of the things that we had assumed, our physics assumed, or our astronomy assumed, turned out not to be true as we discovered the exoplanets. And
well, you're right, though. We've taken the phobia away.
Yeah, and the other thing is, we look at the vast distances and we say, we can't do that. A chemical rocket's not going to be able to take us to another star system. We have ways of doing that, but it takes way too long to get there. They talk about solar sails, which would use the solar wind to push the spacecraft. The empty space is full of hydrogen. You can use a hydrogen to kind of fuel your spacecraft, so you refuel as you go along. There's all kinds of ways of defeating that one problem, but you're still limited by the speed of light, which leads us to the point, is there a way of defeating the speed of light? And can you travel faster than the speed of light if you know how to do it? Or is there a way of manipulating space so the distances don't matter? We just don't know that right now. But every time you look at something, at one point they were saying, we have to be careful with the trains, because if they travel 60 miles an hour, it's going to suck the air out of your lungs and you'll suffocate. Well, we know that's not true. So there's people that say, well, you can't do it because of this, but we always find a way to do it.
Yeah, you just eliminate motion. You take Einstein out of the equation, right? Because as you approach the speed of light, you increase mass.
Yes.
Right? Okay, so you take that part out. That's what you do, and that's what ET would have had to have figured out. Too many times, I think, Kevin, this is my own personal experience, but we hear this over and over again. It just appeared, and then it disappeared. Well, think about that. That's how it should be. You know, you and I grew up with the nuts and bolts idea, ET in a flying saucer, right? Flying across forever, across the universe, sitting in a chair without a bed, by the way, no bedroom, no pool table. Yeah, no kitchen. No, just for 10,000 years, you know. But that's our level of understanding at that time. Today, it's not that kind of party. We understand more about science and physics, and it's going to continue that way. You take motion out of it. That's it. You take motion out of it, and you insert something else, and that's how they're doing it. And that's how they're getting it done. That's how they appear, and that's how they disappear. I don't know if it's interdimensional. I don't know.
That's the question. We don't know how they do it, and our science doesn't allow us to do it, which doesn't mean that somebody else's science is able to do it. They can do it. They figured it out. We haven't.
Kevin Randle, you're the absolute best, man. Where can everybody go and listen to your show and follow what you're doing?
Well, you can, usually it's linked on my blog. You can take a look at that at kevinrandle.blogspot.com. Got lots of books on UFOs out. Go to amazon.com and look up the books. If you want to learn something about Vietnam, I do a series of books called Vietnam Ground Zero. You can find those on amazon.com as well. So take a look at all of that kind of stuff. And the books are doing well, and I appreciate all of that.
I love you, my brother. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thank you.
Perfect night. Thank you so much, Kevin Randle. His links are below, kevinrandle.blogspot.com. Excellent writing, a tremendous amount of resources are over there. And of course, Kevin Randle, Amazon. That's all you got to do. All his books are listed right there. So what am I doing tomorrow night, everybody? Does anybody know? Can anybody tell me what's going on tomorrow night? I can tell you. Tomorrow night, Richard Spence is here. We are talking about secret societies in America. All of that and much more tomorrow night here on Fade to Black. Right now, thank you to Kevin Randle. I'm Jimmy Church. Go Backley Tappy. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go Backley Tappy.